So well, we left off talking about
The Moors being out of Europe and Spain.
All right, because I said, okay, now I remember. Because I was saying that we know that the Moors went in and conquered Spain in 711, right? And then they told us that the Moors were expelled in 1492,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which is very limited because the Moors were beyond just Spain. They conquered all the way up to Russia because they have some artwork of the Moors being in Russia and all that type of stuff.
Right.
So we've been doped into believing that it was stopped with Spain in 1492, right? But this book right here, the sister wrote this, and it answered a lot of the questions for me just by two concepts.
What's the name of the book?
Servants of Allah, African Muslims enslaved in the Americas.
Okay.
All right, and just the title right there, she wrote a portion in the book where she was talking about how the Moor, because they say Muslims are Arabs, that's the veiled word, but we know that they're Moors.
Right.
They got captured during the slave trade. You know, they call it transatlantic slave trade, but I call it the European slave trade because if you call it the Arab slave trade, let's damn talk about what it is.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The transatlantic, that's all, they just made it 3 points.
Right.
The European slave trade. So when they were captured or whatever and enslaved, some of the Moors were actual students of the universities, right? So now we have the Moors that got caught up in the slave trade. So we have the Moors who were students of the universities, and this is why I go back to 1492. We know it had to be beyond 1492, and the universities were up and running during that time.
Right.
So now the question is, was Oxford ran by Moors? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Were the universities ran by the Moors, and then the Europeans, they allowed the Europeans to come get taught by the Moors, right? And so once we understand that, the Moors were up and running, the universities were up and running, and they were getting taught, the students were getting taught way past 1492, right?
Because I'm trying to understand, if the Europeans were in the Dark Ages, how could they then establish something like an Oxford if it wasn't for Moors being there to educate them?
Exactly.
Okay.
You know, so now you got the universities up and running. They had to be up and running past 1492. We're so limited in our evaluation, our analytical thinking. We go along with what the Europeans tell us that the Moors were kicked out in 1492. Like I said, they conquered the whole Europe, man. They're the ones that brought them into the trade, right?
Right.
And like I was saying, the gold, that's why I always say the gold standard didn't start until China asked the Europeans. They told them, yo, we don't want your wine and wool, we want gold. Why did they want gold? Because that's what they were doing, their artisan, their artifacts or whatever,
Right.
what you call it, the art stuff in gold. You know what I'm saying? Like the vases and all that type of stuff.
Right.
In gold. You know? I don't want to do what I need wine for. I can produce my own wine. Wool, what the hell I want to put that on my body for? Y'all ain't got nothing to offer.
Right. And they was using silk.
Right.
Right.
So then what do? You know, the Moors introduced you, and you realize that the gold is down there in Ghana. And one thing people have to realize, Ghana wasn't named Ghana until around late 1950s or early 1960s. I don't remember exactly when Nkrumah did it, right? So anything before that time, it wasn't Ghana, it was the Gold Coast.
Right.
You got to understand your history.
Right.
But going back to the Moors, now you realize, and this is one thing that like we're working on in the book, now you realize that the Moors were caught up in the slave trade, right? So now you go to things like the Haitian Revolution, right? The so-called slaves that were go ahead.
Well, let me stop you. When you say the Moors were caught up in the slave trade, initially that sounded like you were saying that the Moors were the slavers. So
Right.
Elaborate on what you mean by that.
Not only were they possibly could be the slavers because you had the Arabs doing it,
Okay.
but they got caught up as the people to capture. They were to
Okay.
kidnap people.
There you go.
And what they, she said in here, one of the Muslims or the Moors had told the captors, the kidnappers, yo, my father will send a replacement because there was a whole system of slavery. And that's what now we call it the indentured servants, right? But that was the whole system. You know, once you were captured or whatever, but then you converted to another religion, like if you were captured by Christians, you converted to Christianity and you were Muslim, they would have to release you and now you're their brother.
Right.
What takes us to that movie Amistad, right? You remember when old boy looked at the book and he said, this must be